Hello there, welcome back to my channel. We are entering one of my favorite times of year. Not only is it fall on the calendar and hopefully cool weather is coming, oh we hope, but it also means a new fall release from Too Faced. And this year it is the Cinnamon Swirl palette. So in today's video, I'm gonna go over everything about this palette, the shades inside, I'll show you swatches, I'm gonna give you a demo of this look here, and then at the end, I'm going to show you how it compares to the previous 3 fall palettes released from Too Faced. If you're new here, be sure you hit that subscribe button. Now let's get started. All right, so the packaging, once again, Too Faced hits it out of the park. It is adorable. This is the outer box. And then the palette itself looks like this. It is the same metal tin as their previous palettes. And it is also the exact same size as the previous versions. It is filled with 18 shadows. There are 8 mattes, 10 shimmers. It does have a full-length mirror. I love all of the fun names on this palette. They did a really nice job of being creative and kept everything in the baking cinnamon roll kind of theme. So really appreciated that. And as far as the formulation on these shadows, you're gonna get to see them in action in a moment, but I would say these shadows seem to be a little bit softer. And when you're putting your brush in the mattes, you are seeing some kick up in the pan, but I didn't feel like I had excessive fallout below the eyes as I was applying. There is a lot of variation in the shimmer formulas in this palette. Some are just really nice and smooth and buttery, and then others have kind of more loose kind of flakes to them and take a little bit of building. So I'll talk about that again in the demo. You'll see a couple of ways that I like to apply those. But the color scheme in this palette is overall very warm, lots of browns. I'll pop on the screen some swatches. Now, as you're looking at the swatches on the screen, it's pretty hard to divert your attention away from that really super bright purpley shade, and it is a metallic-y shade, so that's something to note for sure. And I think Too Faced just likes to throw in those random shades just to try and break us out of our box of neutrals. I don't know, but the rest of the palette you'll see is quite neutral leaning. Now, this palette does retail for $49 and is available at Ulta on the Too Faced website, and I'm sure it will probably translate down to Sephora as well, but I'm not sure it's there yet. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the demo, and then at the end of this video, I'm going to show you side-by-side comparisons between the previous 3 palettes and a couple of others that I found similar in my collection. I've already applied the Thrive Cosmetics 360 Waterproof Eyeshadow Primer. So now on my Sigma E50, I'm going to start off with this cream shade called Flower Power. And even though this is a matte shade, when you see it go on, it is so brightening that it almost looks like it has a pearlescent finish. Isn't that crazy? So very brightening shade, and because I have quite a bit of Sunless Tanner on, I'm going to go in with a little bit of Doughboy, which is the shade right next to it, and just real lightly go over the top of that. So it leaves some of that brightness to peek through right at the arch of the brow, but it tones it down just a little bit. Next, going in with the BK Beauty 201, we are going in with Ready, Set, Bake, which is one of my favorite shades in the palette. It's pink, right? Don't worry, I am not going in the pink direction with this look, as you've already seen, but I want to show you this shade because I think it is a really beautiful matte pink shade. It does not go on patchy. It's a real nice kind of cooler tone pink, and yet I feel like I can still get away with it with my warm tone skin. So real pretty shade. But what I like to do is, if I am still gonna end up in kind of the warm tones, which I am, then I like to go in with this far corner shade, which is Lick the Spoon. All these phrases make me think of my baking this last weekend. I turned on the oven for the first time in quite a long time and baked some cupcakes. So just putting that right over the top, and you can see what a pretty color those 2 shades combined make. And once again, that shade blended really easily, not patchy at all. So those are two of some of my favorite shades in this palette. All right, we're gonna deepen things up a little bit. I'm gonna go in with this shade, which is Cinnamon Swirl. And using a BK Beauty 206 brush, I'm just gonna keep this right on the outer part of the corner here, and working just a tiny little bit of that into the outer part of the crease. Just to add a little depth here. And then I'll go back with a little bit of Lick the Spoon and Ready, Set, Bake, and use that around the edge to further diffuse that color. So these deeper shades, I do feel like they take a little more blending power. So that's why it is good to start off with one of those lighter shades, I think, in the crease. It makes blending easier. Now on the lid, I want to show you a couple of the shimmer shades and the different textures. So I'm going to start off with this shade right here, which is called Sticky Buns. And this is one of the smooth metallic shadows in the palette. I'm going to place this kind of in the center part of the lid. And you can see that has just immediate, intense color payoff. And then I'm gonna wipe off my finger and next go in with this shade right here, Frost Those Buns. And this one looks like it's gonna be real white, but it actually still has that pale kind of shimmery gold shift to it. So again, a very smooth formula and very pigmented. And now, because I want to kind of tone down the orange part of that, I'm gonna go in with this shade right here, which is the shimmery pink. Of course I'm gonna do that, right? Called Sticky Fingers. Now this one is a little more on the flaky side, not quite as dense pigmentation. And so I have been using this as kind of a topper shade to just kind of change the overall tone of some of these brighter orangey gold shades. It's also pretty on its own, but if you use it on its own, you are going to have to wet your brush. Now, speaking of wetting my brush, I am going to now show you what happens when you wet these shadows. Because right now, I mean, it's okay, but you can see quite a lot of the texture of the glitter. So I'm just gonna wet my brush. This is the Maybelline setting spray. You can use whatever setting spray you have. And I'm just gonna first just tap over it. I don't have any shadow on my brush, and just show you how that smoothed everything out. And you can still see kind of like, it makes it like a trio chrome shift on the lid. You see that kind of pink and the gold and a little bit of that copper. So I think it makes a really pretty combination. And I do prefer the shadows in, the shimmer shadows in this palette wet. Once those lid shades have dried, just go back with the 206 from BK Beauty. I'm just going to lightly put that through the crease. Be careful not to disturb those shimmery shades on the lid, but just kind of making sure everything is nicely blended there. Now I'm gonna add some liner to the upper lash line in a moment, but I'm gonna first go to the lower lash line, and I'm using the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk eyeliner. And this is such a beautiful reddish brown shade. It's very close to, if you have the NYX Faux Blacks in Oxblood, it's a very similar shade. So if you have that one, you could use that. But I didn't want anything that had too much kind of pinky purple in it, and I think this is perfect. And then I'm gonna work just a little bit of this also into the roots of my lashes as well. And I'm not taking it all the way across, just stopping about 2/3 of the way across. Next, taking my Morphe M432, I am going in with Cinnamon Swirl and going right under the lashes, but just pressing that shadow right into the roots of the lashes there, right on top of that eyeliner. Helps set it in place and fill in any gaps there between the lashes. And then here on the outer edge, I'm going to take a little bit more of that shadow, just kind of give myself a little bit of a guideline of kind of where I want to go with my upper lash line liner. I haven't used this in quite a while. This is the Buxom Here's My Number. This is the Hold the Line waterproof pencil, and it's a super dark, deep brown. So I'm gonna use this kind of like I normally do, starting about halfway across the upper lash line and really staying close to the lashes right here. And then out here towards the edge, I am going to just wedge that just slightly and kind of create just a little bit of a point there. This is a very soft and creamy pencil. It does set and stay very well. And then here towards the front, I'm just gonna smudge a little bit, and I'm really just working this into the lashes, not much on the lid. And then I'll take the BK Beauty 204 brush and just a kind of a smudge brush, and I'm gonna go in with a tiny little bit of this dark brown called Batter Up. Top off really well, and I'm really just going to stamp that right on the edge, so it just softens the top part of that eyeliner. And I'm really just almost stamping it. I'm not really working it into the lash line at all. And that helps keep the pigment of that liner underneath, and then just helps set the liner in place and diffuse that line just slightly. One final step on the lower lash line, I want to go back with a little bit of these two shades that we have in the crease. So Ready, Set, Bake and Lick the Spoon on the Morphe M432. And use those just right here real softly, just to soften the edge of that line. Because sometimes if you leave that kind of harsh, it looks like a harsh stop. And I don't want that harsh stopping point there. All right, time to clean up under the eyes and finish up the rest of the face. Okay, I went ahead and applied mascara, little bronzer contour. For mascara, I used this combination, the Lancome Sills Booster XL Primer, IT Cosmetics Superhero, and then the Thrive Cosmetics Liquid Lash Extensions. I like this on the lower lash line so I don't get any smudging. For my bronzer contour combination, I used the Wayne Goss Satin Bronze. This is his Radiance Boosting Face Palette. This is the medium shade range. And then for blush, I've been debating between several. You could really take it in any direction, but I decided on more of a deeper color for my lips. So I'm gonna go in with the Patrick Ta She's So LA blush, and I'm using first the powder, and this is the Morphe E4 brush, and putting this just on the tops of the cheeks. I decided this is probably one of the perfect shades for this combination. It has a little bit of kind of some bronziness, and yet there's just that hint of kind of some pink tones to it. I don't know, it's such a pretty blush, and I've been so surprised how much I love it. And then I am going to go ahead and top it with a little bit of the cream blush. If you've never seen this done, it can be a little scary, but it somehow works. So I know, putting cream on top of powder. This is the Luxe 522 brush. And as long as you don't swirl it into it, it just adds this nice little bit of extra rosiness there, and then a little bit of some glow. So I really enjoy this combination, and you can see how it ties in well with what we've got going on in the crease. For highlighter today, I've pulled out an oldie but a goodie. This is the Balm Cosmetics Mary Luminizer. You can see it's very well loved. Using the MAC 140 fan brush and really going lightly on the tops of the cheeks. I don't need tons of glow because we have that glow from the blush, but I really like to add just a little bit of highlight there, and then I'll put a little bit on the tops, on the bridge of the nose, and the Cupid's bow. Now going back to our palette for inner corner highlight, I'm going to do a combination of this shade and this one. So first going in with Flower Power on a Sigma E30, and this is going to just bring a lot of brightness. So you could certainly just use this as an inner corner highlight. That is how brightening that shade is, which is really wonderful. And then I'm going to top it with a little bit of Frost Those Buns. This is the shade we used kind of on the inner portion of the lid here. So I'm just going to kind of help blend all of that together. After applying concealer, you can lose some of that brightness there. And for my lip combination, I did already apply the MAC Soft Ochre Paint Pot around the edge of my lips and let that dry. For lip liner now, I'm going to use the Smashbox Be Legendary Lip Liner, and this is in dark reddish brown. And for my lipstick, I've chosen one of my favorite fall lipsticks, and I know it's only early September, but boy, am I ready for fall. This is MAC's O lipstick. And then if you're not quite ready for this dark of a lip yet, you can tone it down with kind of a shimmery gold lipstick or a lip gloss. I'm gonna go in with a lipstick. I rarely use this on camera, but this is such a great lipstick. This is by Origins, and it is the shade Champagne Orchid. I just concentrated that mostly kind of in the center part, just to add a little bit of lightness and kind of make the lips look a little pouty. Okay, and here is our finished look. So I do really love this finished look. I love this color combination on the lid. So now let's get into the comparison between the Cinnamon Swirl palette and the other 3 fall palettes that Too Faced has released. And then I'll finish out with kind of my overall final thoughts. So I'm gonna pop on the screen. I took several side-by-side pictures because I think it's easier for you to look at a still photo than me to try and clumsily hold them up here side by side. So I'm gonna go ahead and first compare it with the original Gingerbread Spice palette. So this was the first one I think that kicked off these fall palettes, and I really loved the Gingerbread Spice palette, and you can see the comparison. The Gingerbread Spice palette definitely has a lot more pops of color, and you're going to be hearing me say that often, but you can see the bright pink and orange, but then it does have a little bit of some of those purples, just a couple gold shadows. So not quite as many golds in that one. So I feel like the 2 palettes are quite different. Now in the Gingerbread Spice palette, this original one, there were 9 matte shadows. So just keep that in mind. I'll tell you kind of progressively as we go along. So the next one then is the Extra Spicy palette. And again, side-by-side pictures. There seem to be a few more similar shadows between these 2 because the Extra Spicy did have a few more of those shimmery bronze shades and some more golds, but then it did bring in kind of that oddball kind of shimmery blue, which wasn't my favorite, but it does have kind of more of the hot tamale shade, that kind of like brighter pinky red, and then kind of a dark rose color. There was the matte butterscotch shade in there. So again, side by side, I feel like there are some big differences between the 2. And this Extra Spicy palette has 11 mattes. And so I think personally that is why this palette has been so user-friendly for me, because I do love a palette that has lots of mattes in there. So yeah, as we go along, I think you're gonna be knowing where this video is ending up. Okay, and then finally we have the Pumpkin Spice palette, which was released last year. This one to me is the most colorful of all of them, because we have greens, we have purples, we've got pinks, we've got orange, peach, and some people loved that and some people didn't. But I personally was surprised how much I really have enjoyed this palette, because I do feel like it is very versatile. There's enough cool tones in there to do cool tone looks, and then you've got colorful shades, you've got lots of warmth. So between these two palettes, I think there is the greatest difference between the two. So if you have the pumpkin spice palette, you're not gonna have to worry about lots of overlap in this current palette. Also, the pumpkin spice palette wins the prize of the most number of mattes, with it being 12. So 12 of the 18 shadows in this palette were matte. So as you see the palette side by side, I think you'll see that this palette is quite different from those others. And I think to me, the difference is it has a lot less color variation than any of the other palettes. If you take out really these three shades right here, it is a very neutral brown, gold, bronze palette. So that's not a bad thing, but I think if you are a typical collector of these fall palettes and you always get excited, you might feel like I was and be a little underwhelmed with the color selection. So because this palette does just have so many similar shades, I found that the 5 looks or so I've created with this palette pretty much all end up going in that brown direction, because your deepest tones are browns. And then this one that is a deep shimmery purple, it really doesn't come across as purple on the lid. It does kind of come across as more of like a murky gray, but you can get kind of a purple look if you bring in these shades, a purpley pink look, and I'm not mad about that. I do love a good purple pink look, but otherwise, I just don't really feel like this palette lends itself to too many different color combinations. Having said that, if you're somebody who did not like all of the color options in the previous palettes, then this might be something that you are saying, yes, finally a really good neutrals palette. Now, the last thing to note is this palette has the least number of mattes, totaling 8. And because of that, I think that hinders your ability to really go in too many directions with this palette. Now, once I dug in and started playing around with this palette, there were 2 other palettes that came to mind that I thought, oh, you know, that kind of reminds me of that palette. And one is the Natasha Denona Bronze palette. And I had a similar critique with this one. I felt like there were a lot of kind of overlapping shimmer shades, nothing like super bright. Now this one does have some of those brighter shades, and you see this one has kind of that dark, murky kind of purpley color as well. But you know, similarly, I feel like the looks that you create with this palette do primarily end up in kind of that goldy, bronzy, warm tone look, just like pretty much you're going to get with the Cinnamon Roll palette. Now, the other palette that came to mind that I really wanted to see side by side was the Teddy Bear palette, also from Too Faced. Many of you saw this in a recent Darlings and Duds video, and this was a surprise hit for me. I did not expect to love it as much as I do. So I wanted to see what these colors looked like next to the Cinnamon Roll palette, because I've really enjoyed the looks that I've created. So as you see the side by side, I think you're gonna see some similarities in the fact that this Teddy Bear palette does have some of those warm browns and some golds. But here is why I actually prefer to reach for this one over the Cinnamon Roll. And it's because this deep dark color, even though it looks just like a boring old brown, it actually has a hint of plum. And you see that difference on the eyes. Each one of these shadows also has just a little hint of some rosiness that I think makes them just that much different than your typical brown shadow. And then you've got this really wonderful warm pink, which shows up warm pink. And even though the shimmers in here, I feel like there is a little bit of overlap, these are just really smooth metallic colors. So what are my overall thoughts on this palette? Well, you can probably guess. I am just underwhelmed by this palette, sadly. It is one that, as I mentioned at the beginning, I look forward to every year to see what they're going to do. And I just don't find this being a palette that I am going to be super excited to use on a daily basis. Personally, I would actually gravitate towards using this palette over the Cinnamon Roll palette. Now, if the other fall palettes were still available, I would definitely recommend one of those. But if you already own one of those other palettes, I really don't know that this is going to add a whole lot to your collection unless you don't have very many browns and bronzy shades in your collection, and those are the shades that you really love. I hope that this review was helpful and those side-by-side comparisons. If any of you have been wondering, like I was, whether you needed to add this palette to your collection, hopefully the information I shared with you today will help you make an informed purchase decision. As always, all of the products that I used in today's demo and the palettes I talked about will be listed and linked in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.